I opened my eyes to the blinding glow of hospital fluorescents and the cold, sterile scent of disinfectant. For a moment, I didn't know who I was. My limbs were heavy, my mouth dry, and my thoughts scattered like broken glass across a floor. A nurse noticed my stirring and rushed out of the room, calling for a doctor. Minutes later, I was told the truth. I'd been in a coma for 3 months. The words landed like a punch. 3 months. Gone. My last memory was a Friday afternoon, late autumn sunlight slanting through my apartment window while I made coffee. Everything after that? Darkness. No warning, no dreamscape, no tunnel of light. Just a void that ended with me blinking against the harsh reality of fluorescent bulbs. My sister, Claudia, was already sitting at my bedside when I came to. She looked tired, as though she hadn't slept in weeks, but her eyes were wide and damp when they met mine. "You're back," she whispered. "Thank God." Claudia and I weren't particularly close, but we weren't strangers either. Growing up, we had our share of fights, but we also shared bunk beds, birthday cakes, and whispered secrets. She was the older one, always a step ahead, smart, persuasive, polished. I was the quiet one, the reader, the planner, the one who didn't take risks. In the days that followed, I tried to recover physically and mentally. I had to learn to walk again, to eat without feeling nauseated. My brain was sluggish, processing the world in slow motion. Claudia was always there. She brought me food, adjusted my pillows, read me news headlines. She even handled the paperwork, medical records, insurance, bank statements. At first I was grateful. Then I started noticing things. The nurses kept asking about my discharge. Plan. "Will you be returning to your apartment?" one asked casually. "I assume your bills are being covered by your employer." Apartment? Employer? That's when I asked Claudia. Her answer was smooth, too smooth. "Oh, you can't go." "Back to your apartment," she said. "The lease was up. I took care of it. You're better off staying with me for a while." "And my job?" She hesitated. "They let you go after a month. No fault of theirs, really. They needed someone in your role." It stung. Not just the information, but the way she delivered it, like it had all been decided without me. And maybe it had. When I finally got access to my phone, Claudia had insisted it had been damaged during the incident. I noticed that everything had been wiped. My email was logged out. My banking apps were gone. Social media? Deactivated. Something wasn't right. I asked for my wallet. She couldn't find it. My ID must have been lost during the hospital transfer. Every question I asked created 2 more in its place. Every answer Claudia gave was too neat, too rehearsed. I remembered one thing. I had set up a secure backup email for emergencies. I logged in quietly one night, hiding the glow of the screen under my hospital blanket. What I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of emails from banks I didn't recognize, transactions I never authorized, credit cards opened in my name, a mortgage application. I scrolled until I found one from a real estate agency. Claudia's name was listed as the co-signer. The property? My childhood home. The house had been in both our names since our parents passed, but I had never agreed to sell. I went deeper. I found e-signed documents with my forged signature. I found records of my personal savings being drained in monthly increments. I found a name I didn't recognize listed as a power of attorney. It was Claudia. I confronted her the next morning. Her smile barely wavered. "I did what I had to do," she said. "You were gone. Someone had to take charge." "I was in a coma, not dead." She shrugged. "You don't understand how complicated things got. The bills, the property taxes. I saved everything." "She didn't save it. She stole it." The thing is, I had anticipated something like this years ago, back when our father was dying and Claudia tried to coerce him into changing his will. I'd had a lawyer quietly draft a secondary document giving me irrevocable power of attorney in any medical emergency. It had to be enacted by a specific contact, an old friend of my father's, a retired judge. Claudia didn't know about him. I called him that afternoon. When he heard my voice, there was a long pause. Then he said, "I was wondering when you'd... Wake up. I've been holding this file for you." Within 48 hours, everything changed. My bank accounts were frozen for fraud investigation, the sale of the house was halted, creditors were contacted. Claudia's assets, most of which were now technically mine, were seized. She cried, she yelled, she begged. But she never apologised. I didn't press charges, I didn't need to. I let the paper trail ruin her. She lost everything she'd stolen. Me? I rebuilt. From a hospital bed with trembling fingers, I reset my life, and this time no one else gets to write my story but me. The hospital let me go a week after the fallout. I left in a wheelchair, still too weak to walk long distances, my muscles atrophied from months of motionlessness. Claudia wasn't there. She'd stopped coming after I reclaimed my power of attorney and froze the accounts. The silence between us was an open wound, but it was preferable to the lies she'd been feeding me. I stayed at a rehabilitation centre for 2 more weeks. The nurses there were kind but distant, as if they'd read too many headlines about families torn apart by inheritance fraud to be shocked anymore. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't ready to explain how my sister had rewritten the pages of my life in my absence. It felt like revealing too much of myself to strangers who couldn't help. It wasn't just my body I had to rehabilitate. It was my identity. My friend Naomi picked me up the day I was released. She'd been out of the country when the coma started, and by the time she returned, Claudia had told her I was being moved to a private care facility with limited visitation. Naomi wrapped her arms around me as if I might dissolve. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I would have come." I didn't blame her. Claudia had always had a talent for deception. I just never thought she'd use it. On me. Naomi's apartment became my refuge. She made space for me in her guest room and stocked the fridge with soft foods I could stomach. She didn't ask too many questions at first, but I could feel them hovering between us. It wasn't until the 3rd night that I finally spoke. "She took everything," I said, staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above us. "My money, my house, my name." Naomi didn't respond right away. Then she said, "Why?" The question hung there, echoing louder than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe because she could. Maybe she thought I wouldn't come back. Or maybe she thought I never really mattered to begin with." The days blurred into a routine. Physical therapy in the mornings, financial cleanup in the afternoons. I spent hours on the phone with banks, creditors, fraud investigators. Each call felt like peeling back another layer of betrayal. The most damning piece came when I accessed Claudia's email. I hadn't even meant to. One of the shared real estate documents had her email listed, and in a moment of curiosity, I tried logging. In with a password I remembered from college, our childhood dog's name and her birthday. It worked. There it was. The full scope of what she'd done. Hundreds of emails spanning months. Conversations with lawyers, fake employers, forged letters of recommendation she'd used to prove my incapacitation. She'd even emailed a photo of me in a hospital, bed to one bank as proof of her authority. Worse still, she'd been planning it. The earliest emails were dated 2 weeks after I fell into the coma. She had spreadsheets detailing my finances, notes on which bills to keep paying and which to let default, a list of passwords she'd slowly reset by pretending to be me, and one email to a realtor in another state. Attached were pictures of a beach house she'd been eyeing. She was going to sell our family home and buy a new life. I didn't cry when I saw it. I was too hollow, but I forwarded everything to the investigators. There was one email, though, that stopped me cold. Subject: line, regarding the life insurance policy. Claudia had contacted my employer's HR department to ask about my group life insurance. She wasn't listed as a beneficiary, our parents were, and they'd been gone for years. But she had asked, hypothetically, what would happen if I didn't wake up, and she had asked it twice. Once in October, and again in November. I had fallen into the coma in September. Weeks passed, my strength improved. I could walk longer distances without pain. My thoughts began to sharpen. I started journaling again, something I'd stopped, doing years ago, when life had felt too busy to reflect on. One afternoon, Naomi brought me a cardboard box she found at my old apartment building. It had been in the lost mail room for months, according to the superintendent. Claudia had never picked it up. Inside were some of my things, an old sweater, a photo album, a handwritten birthday card from Claudia from years ago. It had a drawing of the two of us in stick figures, me holding a book, her with a microphone as if she were giving a speech. I turned the card over. On the back she'd written, "You're the only person who really knows me. Don't ever leave, okay?" The bitterness was sudden and sharp. That version of her, childlike, sincere, was long gone. Then the phone rang. It was a private number. I hesitated, then picked up, a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Hey, it's me." Claudia. She sounded small, fragile even. I said nothing. I needed to hear your voice. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I forgive myself. She was crying. Or pretending to. I lost everything. You know that, right? The condo, my car. I had to move in with a friend. No one will hire me now. I don't know who I am anymore. I finally spoke. "You're someone who thought I'd never wake up." Silence. "You planned for me to stay gone. You stole my name, Claudia." She sniffled. I didn't know what else to do. I panicked. And then it just kept going. "That's not panic. That's greed." Another pause. Then more softly. "Can we meet? Please, I want to explain." I nearly laughed. She'd explained plenty. Through forged documents, through passwords reset and lives rearranged. Through the erasure of everything I'd built. "No," I said. I hung up. I wanted to believe that was the end. But people like Claudia don't disappear quietly. It started subtly. A notification that someone had tried logging into one of my old social media accounts. Then another attempt on my email. Naomi's dog walker said she saw someone watching the building from across the street. Claudia's number began texting me from different area codes, short messages like "please talk to me" or "this isn't over." I changed my passwords again, locked down my accounts, bought a shredder. Naomi insisted I get a home camera. System. But one night, after coming home from therapy, I found something waiting for me. A manila envelope, slid under the door. No name, no return address. Inside, printed photos of me in the hospital. Copies of the forged documents. A single sticky note attached to the last page. "How much more do you think they'll believe you?" It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge, and I was done playing defense. The night I returned to my apartment, the one I hadn't lived in for months, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Claudia had said she'd taken care of everything, but when I stepped inside, the space felt hollow, like it had been gutted and reassembled just enough to look normal. My furniture was in the same place, my favourite books still lined the shelves, but something was off. Too neat. Too cold. It was like someone had copied my life from memory and gotten the details just slightly wrong. I opened drawers to find missing pieces. No tax documents, no checkbooks, no journals. The shoebox I kept beneath the bed with childhood letters and old photo negatives, gone. Even the small scratch on the hallway wall, the one I got while moving a mirror, had been painted over. She'd been here. Claudia. She had lived in my space, walked in my shoes, worn my name like a second skin. And the more I tried to piece together what had been taken, the more I realised how carefully she'd planned it all. I wasn't safe. The judge, my father's old friend Leonard Graham, had been helping me navigate the legal mess since the moment I called him. We froze the accounts, triggered fraud investigations and reversed what we could. But damage like this doesn't just vanish with a court order. Identity theft isn't just about money, it's about erasure. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had rewritten me. "You're going to need more than lawyers," Leonard said one afternoon, after another long day on the phone with investigators. "You're going to need answers. Real ones." "What do you mean?" She planned this too well. This wasn't just a panicked sister trying to handle paperwork while you were out cold. This was a campaign. And campaigns need motives. He was right. Claudia didn't just want to survive while I was gone. She wanted to replace me. I needed to know why. The first thing I did was request full access logs from the companies she had contacted using my name. Emails, call records, login IPs. I had to be patient. Red tape and bureaucracy slowed everything, but eventually a partial picture emerged, and it led to a name I didn't recognise. Olivia Hart. According to several correspondences, Claudia had used the alias Olivia Hart while corresponding with a legal firm in Connecticut. It was the same firm that had drafted a new living will for me, complete with a forged digital signature. It was also the firm that had facilitated the quiet removal of my name from several joint accounts, replacing it with hers. When I tracked Olivia Hart's email address, I discovered it had been created 3 weeks after I entered the coma. She didn't wait. Claudia had already been planning this. I confronted her again, this time at her condo, which, ironically, I now technically owned after the fraud reversal. Process took effect. She opened the door with a smirk. Her makeup was gone, her clothes loose and faded. She looked nothing like the polished older sister I remembered. But her eyes still had that same defiant gleam. "You really shouldn't be here," she said. "I own the place," I replied. "Or have you forgotten that detail?" She stepped aside without a word. Inside, it was chaos. Unopened mail, takeout, containers, wine bottles stacked in the sink. Claudia was unravelling, and fast. Guilt hadn't done this to her. Losing control had. I stood in the centre of the room while she curled onto the couch, arms wrapped around herself like armour. "You. Use the name Olivia Hart," I said. "You tried to have legal documents drawn up to completely replace me. So? That's not something you do because you're worried about hospital bills, Claudia. That's not something you do unless you want me out of the picture for good." She didn't answer. I stepped closer. "Why? Why go this far?" "You really want the truth?" she said, laughing bitterly. "Fine." She stood up, eyes blazing. "Because you always had it easy. You were the favourite, the quiet one, the smart one. Everyone trusted you. Mum and Dad gave you the house. The bank gave you the loan, you had the friends, the steady job, the goddamn health insurance. I worked for those things, Claudia. No, you existed, and people handed you things. Me, I had to claw my way through everything. I married a man I hated just to survive, and when that fell apart, I had nothing. No one. You think I wanted to be you? I had to." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I almost believed her. Almost. "But you didn't have to steal my life." "You weren't using it," she hissed. "You were lying in a bed with machines breathing for you. I thought—" "You were gone." "I thought—" She cut herself off, like the truth was too shameful to speak aloud. "You thought I wouldn't wake up," I said flatly. Silence. "You hoped I wouldn't." Tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, but I'd seen enough. Left her there, drowning in her own twisted reflection of the truth. I didn't call the police. I didn't scream or threaten. I didn't need to. She was her own sentence, but the story didn't end there. One of the last things I found among the hacked email logs was a message draft, never sent, from Claudia's Olivia Hart account. It was addressed to a man named Michael Trent, and the subject line read, Plan B. The body of the email was short. "If anything goes wrong, you know what to do. I've kept records. If she wakes up, we move to Phase 2. No loose ends. Phase 2? Who the hell was Michael Trent? I gave the name to Leonard, who promised to run it through every legal database he had access to. What he found chilled me to the bone. Michael Trent had been arrested 10 years earlier for elder fraud. He had once posed as a caregiver to an Alzheimer's patient and siphoned nearly $100,000 before being caught. He served 5 years, got out, and vanished. His new alias? Unknown. His whereabouts? Untraceable. The timeline matched. The style matched. And the connection to Claudia? Unclear, but something told me she didn't meet him by accident. This wasn't over. Whatever Claudia had done while I was unconscious went deeper than I thought. And this Michael Trent, or whatever name he used now, might still be out there. Watching. Waiting. I wasn't just rebuilding my life anymore. I was preparing for war. The dust had barely settled from Claudia's downfall when the real unravelling began. I thought that by freezing the accounts, reversing the transactions and severing her power of attorney, I had closed the book on the damage. I had reclaimed my name, my financial future, my home. But identity is a strange, fragile thing. You can claw it back legally, paper by paper, but sometimes the cracks go deeper, into the places records don't reach. A month after the court declared the power of attorney fraudulent and nullified the property sale, I received a letter from the DMV. It was brief and clinical. This notice is to inform you that a recent attempt to renew your driver's license was flagged due to a EKNT duplicate record under your social security number. Please visit your nearest Department of Motor Vehicles to resolve this issue. Duplicate record? I hadn't even tried to renew anything. I went in person. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with red-rimmed eyes, tapped away at her keyboard and frowned at the screen. Then she asked me, almost accusingly, "When was the last time you were in Nevada?" "Nevada?" I asked, startled. "I haven't been to Nevada in years." "Well," she said slowly, "someone using your name and social security number renewed their license there 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago. I was still in recovery, barely able to walk unassisted." She turned the screen toward me. There it was, my name, my birthday, my number. But the photo wasn't me. It was Claudia. She had a new haircut in the picture, longer, dyed a deep chestnut instead of her natural blonde, sunglasses perched on top of her head, smiling like she had nothing to hide. I left the DMV shaking. Claudia had already stolen from me once. She'd signed my name, drained my accounts, tried to erase me. And now she was still using my identity. Somewhere out there, she was living as me again, or some warped, bastardized version of me. I hired a private investigator that same week. His name was Russell Lane. He was retired law enforcement, quiet but sharp-eyed, with an unsettling ability to finish my sentences when I didn't realize I'd left them hanging. He asked for 3 things: my last confirmed activity before the coma, the timeline of Claudia's interference, and every piece of documentation I still had. He took it all: emails, hospital bills, real estate filings, bank transactions, and within 2 weeks he came back with something that chilled me to my core. "There's more than one identity being used," Russell said. "Your sister didn't just impersonate you. She fractured you." "What do you mean?" He laid out a series of documents, different addresses, variations of my name. "Claudia created multiple profiles using your information. Some are close enough to be flagged as fraud, others are just far enough off to stay under the radar." He pointed at a printout of a credit report. "Look at this one, A.M. Ridgway, partial social security match, opened accounts in Arizona and New Mexico. This one here? Ally Ridge, signed a rental agreement in Utah." She sliced me. "Up," I whispered. "Turned me into pieces." He nodded grimly. "And I don't think she did it alone." I froze. "What?" "She had help. At least one person, maybe more. The signatures don't match on some of these forms. Different. Handwriting. And the timestamps on some transactions suggest simultaneous activity across multiple states. Even Claudia couldn't be in 2 places at once. It was dizzying. For every account we shut down, 2 more seemed to pop up. Claudia had turned my life into a shell game. Identities moved from state to state, bank to bank, vanishing and reappearing. Like ghosts, then came the hospital records. Russell had requested a full audit of my medical files, suspecting Claudia may have altered them during my coma. He was right. There were notes in the file that didn't align with my actual care. Authorizations signed not by medical staff, but by Claudia. Medications I was never administered, billed to my insurance. A transfer order from the original hospital, never fulfilled, but logged as complete. And worst of all, a single line buried in the middle of a scanned fax. Patient declared non-communicative and cognitively impaired. Long-term care recommended. See attached power of attorney. That's how she did it, I murmured. That's how she kept control. Russell nodded. She staged it like you weren't coming back. Set you up as permanently damaged. That way, no one questioned her authority. But I did come back. She didn't count on that. The final blow came a few days later, a call from a tech company in Seattle. Their HR department wanted to confirm my employment start date. I'm sorry, what? Yes, the man on the line said, confused. Alison Ridgway, application, submitted 2 weeks ago. Says here you accepted our offer. Remote onboarding begins Monday. I never applied for a job in Seattle. A beat. Then, Oh, I think you should see this. He emailed me a copy of the submitted resume and application. It had my name, my education, my former employer, right down to the address of my old apartment. But the phone number, Claudia's burner, the email, a slight variation on mine, off by one character. The headshot? Her face. Subtly edited, eyes lightened, chin reshaped, just enough to create plausible deniability. But it was her. She wasn't just using my name anymore. She was building a career on it. I called Russell. She's starting over again, as me. He sighed. We need to shut this down. All of it. That's when we decided on the nuclear option. A press release. We worked with a lawyer and a cybersecurity firm to create a paper trail so loud and clear that it couldn't be ignored. A digital footprint mapping Claudia's every forgery, transaction, and impersonation. We sent it to law enforcement, the banks, the hospitals. But more importantly, we gave it to the press, and the press tore it wide open. They called it the Coma. A woman impersonates her own sister during a medical crisis, empties her accounts, assumes her identity, fractures her digital footprint across 5 states, and then tries to disappear into the very name she stole. The public ate it up, but Claudia didn't go quietly. One night I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. No stamp, no postmark, just one word: liar. Inside was a photograph, a childhood picture of the 2 of us, sitting on the swings behind our old house. Claudia had drawn a black X over my face. She wasn't just angry, she was still out there, and she had nothing left to lose. The quiet of my new apartment had a strange weight to it. No beeping monitors, no nurses checking vitals, just silence. I should have felt peace, maybe even relief. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a still lake, calm on the surface, but full of unseen depths. Since reclaiming my identity, every day had been a slow excavation of the truth. Claudia's betrayal was like a long, dark corridor I hadn't yet reached the end of. There were pieces still missing, gaps in time, records that didn't add up, phone calls that ended too quickly. I couldn't let it go. I'd started compiling everything. Documents, emails, screenshots, voice memos, every trace of what she'd done. At first, it was just for my lawyer to clean up the legal mess. But soon it turned into something else. A reckoning. I needed to understand why. How. And deep down, if there was anything left of the sister I used to love. The last piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. I received a manila envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside, a flash drive and a handwritten note in Claudia's familiar cursive. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. You win. But before you bury me, you should know the full story. I didn't act alone. Gone? My chest tightened. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since the court hearings where she barely looked me in the eye. The last time we spoke, her voice had been hollow, like a room with all the furniture stripped out. I plugged in the flash drive. There were dozens of files, PDFs, audio recordings, a video. I clicked on the video first. It opened to Claudia, seated in a dimly lit room, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The same confident posture, but something in her face had cracked. I never planned to steal from you, she began. Not at first, but I was drowning and no one knew. You don't know what it was like after the accident. The doctors said, "You might never wake up. The insurance barely covered anything. I was behind on my mortgage, and then..." He showed up. She looked off screen, then back. "I met him through Dad's old business contacts. Said he could help me get temporary control of your accounts, smooth everything over. He knew everything. Your passwords, your backup email, even your security questions. He promised it was all legal, just paperwork." My blood went cold. He's the one who filed for power of attorney. He forged the real estate documents. I signed things, yes, but only because he made it sound like it was the only way to keep your life from falling apart. She paused. Her voice cracked. And then, when the money started coming in, I stopped asking questions. That's on me, I got used to it. To pretending. To living as you. Because I couldn't live as me anymore. The screen cut to black. The rest of the files corroborated her story. Emails from a consulting firm, one that didn't exist anymore. Legal templates that matched the forged contracts. Voice recordings of conversations between Claudia and a man named Evan Broderick. That name meant nothing to me. So I did what I always did. I dug. Evan Broderick had once worked as an estate consultant. That much was real. But he'd lost his license 5 years ago for fraud. Dozens of cases were buried under NDAs and confidential settlements. No jail time, just a vanished. Career. He specialised in targeting families in crisis, comas, dementia, sudden deaths. Vulnerable people, like Claudia, like me. But why us? I kept digging until I found something I wasn't ready for. A photograph. It was old, at least 20 years, taken at a law conference. My father stood beside 3 other men. One of them was Evan Broderick. They'd worked together. They'd been friends. I stared at the photo for a long time. If this man had known our family, he hadn't just chosen us by accident. He'd planned this. Maybe even waited. The betrayal deepened. Claudia hadn't acted alone, but she hadn't fought for me either. She had stood by while someone gutted my life. Now it was my turn. I brought the files to my attorney. A week later, we turned them over to the State Fraud Division. The investigation opened within days. Broderick had resurfaced in Arizona under a new name, targeting another family. He was arrested trying to flee the country. When they raided his temporary office, they found more files. Claudia wasn't the only sibling he'd manipulated. There were at least 6 other cases, some more tragic than mine. One woman had died, believing her sister had stolen everything when it had all been orchestrated. It didn't absolve Claudia, but it changed the narrative. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had been used. Weeks later, I visited her. The rehab facility was clean and quiet, tucked away in the hills. Claudia looked smaller somehow, like someone had peeled away the layers of armour she'd worn all her life. "I got your note," I said, sitting across. "From her." "I figured," she replied, eyes fixed on the floor. "You could have told me. I didn't think you'd believe me. I still don't know if I do, but I believe you were scared." She looked up then, something flickering behind her eyes. Shame, regret, maybe hope. "I didn't know who I was anymore," she said. "Being you was easier than being me." That hit harder than I expected. We sat in silence for a long time. When I left, she didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. Not yet. Recovery isn't linear. That's what the therapists say. I'd like to believe that's true. I've rebuilt most of my accounts. The house is mine again. My name, my credit, my identity. They're back where they belong. But sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night wondering what else I missed. What else Claudia lived through for me, or instead of me. I stand. In front of mirrors more often now. Sometimes I see her in my reflection, the same tilt of the chin, the same eyes. We were mirrors once, even in our differences. But now I see something else, a sharper gaze, a harder edge, me, fully me, at last.